May I present my sister, Miss Ashworth?" Cecilia felt the words land like a slap, dressed up in silk. She kept her spine straight, her chin lifted, her lips curved into the small, practiced smile she had worn all evening, the smile of a woman who has learned that her face must never say what her heart is screaming. Beside her, Julian's hand rested at her elbow, light as a stranger's, though 3 months ago that same hand had trembled as he slid a ring onto her finger in a chapel outside Gretna Green. Lady Farrow, resplendent in amber silk, inclined her head with the faint, assessing courtesy, the ton reserved for women whose worth had not yet been established. "Miss Ashworth, how charming. I had no notion Lord Ashworth had a sister." "An oversight of introductions," Julian said smoothly, "not of affection." Cecilia curtsied. It was, she thought, the most difficult thing she had ever done, deeper and more difficult than the vows she'd spoken in that cold little chapel, because those vows had been true, and this curtsy was a lie she had agreed to tell with her whole body. She was his wife. The ballroom did not know it. His own grandfather did not know it. And in less than a minute, across the gleaming expanse of candlelit floor, she would watch Julian bow over the gloved hand of Miss Arabella Finch, the young woman his grandfather had chosen for him, and she would have to smile through that too. 3 months earlier, there had been no ballrooms, no false names, no careful distance measured out in inches between a husband's hand and a wife's arm. There had been only a country lane in Derbyshire, and Julian Ashworth on his knee in the mud without a thought for his boots, saying words Cecilia Hartley had never expected any gentleman to say to a solicitor's daughter, that he did not care what his grandfather wanted, that he had never cared for anything the way he cared for her, that he would marry her before God and worry about the rest of the world afterward. She had believed him. She still believed him. That was the trouble. The rest of the world, it turned out, was the Earl of Rowan, Julian's grandfather, and holder of an estate so encumbered by debt that its survival depended entirely on the marriage settlement written into the old Earl's will. The clause was simple and merciless. The current Viscount Ashworth, upon reaching 25, would inherit the whole of the Rowan estate free and clear, provided he married with his grandfather's consent. Marry without it, and the estate passed instead to his cousin Reginald, along with every tenant, every servant, every debt the Rowan name had accumulated across 2 generations of poor harvests and worse investments. Julian would not turn 25 for another 4 months. "I will tell him," Julian had said, again and again, in the weeks after their secret marriage, pacing the small parlor of the townhouse he kept for her, under a name that was not his own. "The moment I have my inheritance secured, I will tell the whole world. I will announce it at the assembly rooms if you like. I will hire a man to cry it in the street." And until then, Cecilia had asked. Until then, she was his sister, a poor relation, recently arrived from the country, introduced into society under his protection, so that no one would ask too many questions about who she was or where she had come from. It was, Julian swore, only a matter of months, a masquerade with an ending already written. She had not understood, then, how long 4 months could feel, when you were made to watch the man you'd married court another woman in front of God and all his relations. Here at Lady Farrow's ball, watching him bow to Arabella Finch, Cecilia understood it perfectly. Arabella was lovely in the unthreatening way society preferred its heiresses, golden-haired, softly spoken, possessed of a fortune large enough to please the Earl and a temperament mild enough to please everyone else. She looked at Julian the way a woman looks at a match she has been told is a good one and has decided, dutifully, to want. Cecilia could not even hate her for it. Arabella did not know she was dancing with someone else's husband. Arabella did not know anything at all. "You look pale, Miss Ashworth." The voice at Cecilia's shoulder belonged to a man she had been introduced to only an hour before. Mr. Reginald Ashworth, Julian's cousin, whose dark eyes missed very little. Perhaps the heat of the room. "Perhaps," Cecilia said. "You watch my cousin very closely. For a sister." The words were light. The eyes were not. Cecilia felt something cold move through her chest. Not quite fear. Not yet. but its early cousin, the small animal alertness that comes before fear properly arrives. If you have ever kept a secret that felt too large for your body, the kind that presses against your ribs when someone looks at you a moment too long, then you already know exactly what Cecilia was feeling in that instant. Stay with me. This story only gets harder from here, and I promise you, the truth does not stay buried forever. He is the only family I have in London, she said carefully. I confess, I watch him the way any woman watches her only anchor in an unfamiliar sea. Reginald smiled, and it did not reach his eyes. How very devoted. He moved away into the crowd, and Cecilia let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, and did not allow herself to wonder, not yet, how much Reginald Ashworth already suspected. The weeks that followed compounded like interest on a debt no one had agreed to pay. Julian's grandfather, the Earl, took a sudden and inconvenient fondness for his supposed granddaughter. He insisted she attend every dinner, every card party, every excursion to Vauxhall, where the Ashworth name might be seen and approved of. He asked, with the terrible innocence of a man who has no idea what he is asking, why Miss Ashworth never spoke of her parents, why she flinched at the mention of Derbyshire, why she wore, tucked beneath her glove where no one was meant to see it, the faint pale line where a wedding ring had once sat before Julian had begged her, weeping, to remove it for the sake of 4 more months. Cecilia learned to lie the way one learns any difficult craft, badly at first, then with a fluency that frightened her. She invented a dead mother. She invented a modest inheritance that explained her wardrobe. She learned to speak of Julian as my brother in a tone flat enough that no one would hear how the word tasted like ash in her mouth. And she learned, worst of all, to watch him court Arabella Finch in drawing rooms and gardens and the private boxes of the opera, and to say nothing, because to say anything was to risk everything: his inheritance, his tenants, the 400 people whose livelihoods depended on the Rowan estate passing to a man who loved them rather than to a cousin who, whatever his other qualities, had made his contempt for the tenantry plain at every dinner Cecilia had endured. It was at one such dinner, in the 3rd week of April, that Reginald Ashworth found her alone on the terrace, escaping the candle smoke and the noise. "I have made inquiries, Miss Ashworth," he said, without preamble. "There is no record of a Miss Ashworth born to any branch of this family in the last 30 years. There is, however, a record of a Miss Cecilia Hartley, daughter of a Derbyshire solicitor, who left her father's house in February and has not been seen there since." Cecilia said nothing. There was, in that moment, nothing to say that would not be a confession. "You needn't answer," Reginald went on, and there was something almost gentle in his voice now, which frightened her more than his coldness had. "I understand exactly what you are, Miss Hartley. What I do not yet understand is what you intend to do about it. Because in 5 weeks, my cousin turns 25, and I confess, I find myself with a rather pressing interest in how the next month unfolds." He was not cruel by nature, she would learn later, only cornered, as men often are when an estate stands between themselves and the ruin of a family they, too, were sworn to protect. His own father's debts had been quietly absorbed by Rowan money for years. Without Julian's failure, Reginald's own household faced disgrace. It did not excuse what came next, but it explained it, in the way that the best and worst reasons for cruelty are so often the same reason: love for people who are not the person standing in front of you. He did not threaten her outright. He did not need to. He only smiled and bowed and left her alone on the terrace with the cold April air and the certain knowledge that the ground beneath her secret had just begun, very quietly, to crack. She told Julian that night, in the small hours, in the townhouse where he was permitted to visit his own wife only after dark, like a thief in his own life. "He knows," she said. "Reginald knows everything." Julian went very still. She had learned, in 3 months of marriage, that this stillness was not calm. It was the particular quiet of a man doing arithmetic with his own ruin. "Then we have 5 weeks, he said, "to make certain it does not matter what he knows. And if he tells your grandfather before then?" "He won't." Julian said it with more confidence than his face wore. It does not serve him to move too soon. He will wait until the moment does the most damage, at some ball, in front of everyone, where the humiliation is public and the disinheritance is unavoidable. Reginald has always preferred an audience. If you're the kind of person who feels a story settle into your chest like a held breath, you'll understand why I have to pause here. Not to break the spell, only to ask you to stay in it a little longer. What happens next is the reason this story exists at all. Don't look away yet. Then what do we do? Cecilia asked. Julian took her hands. Bare now. Always bare now. The ring kept hidden in a locked drawer she visited, the way other women visited a grave. We survive 5 weeks, he said. And then I tell the world the truth, whatever it costs. And no one, not my grandfather, not Reginald, not the whole of the ton, will ever again have the power to make you curtsy to a lie. She wanted, more than anything, to believe that 5 weeks was a distance she could bear to walk. She did not yet know that Reginald would not wait 5 weeks. She did not know that he would not wait 5 days. The blow, when it came at the Rowan family's own ball. A grand affair thrown by the Earl himself to formally announce Julian's understanding with Arabella Finch, a fortnight before the settlement was to be signed, and a fortnight and a half before Julian's birthday would render the whole cruel arrangement unnecessary. Cecilia had begged to be excused from attending. The Earl would not hear of it, his granddaughter, absent from his own grandson's betrothal ball? Unthinkable. She stood, therefore, in a gown the color of a bruised violet, watching Julian lead Arabella onto the floor for the dance that would, by custom, all but announce the engagement to 300 guests, and she understood, with a clarity that felt like drowning, that she was watching her own husband perform his wedding to another woman, while she smiled and was called his sister. It was in the hush after that dance, in the exact silence that follows an announcement everyone has been waiting for, when 300 people draw breath at once, that Reginald Ashworth stepped forward with a folded paper in his gloved hand. Before congratulations are offered, he said, pitched to Carrie, I believe there is a matter of some urgency the family ought to know. It concerns the true nature of my cousin's sister. Every fear Cecilia had carried for 3 months arrived in her chest at once, all together, like a door blown open in a storm. If you have ever watched the worst thing you feared become the thing actually happening, in real time, in a room full of witnesses, with no way to stop it, you know there is a particular kind of silence that follows. I won't look away from it, and I'm asking you not to either. Stay to the end. She earns it. So does he. The Earl's face had gone the color of old parchment. Reginald, explain yourself. Gladly. Reginald unfolded the paper. A marriage record, Cecilia realized with a lurch, procured somehow from the parish register in that small chapel outside Gretna Green. Miss Ashworth is no relation to this family whatsoever. Her true name is Cecilia Hartley, daughter of a Derbyshire solicitor, and she has been, for the last 3 months, my cousin Julian's wife. The word dropped into the ballroom like a stone into still water, and the silence that followed rippled outward in whispers, in gasps, in the particular hiss of 300 fans opening at once. Cecilia did not move. She could not. She watched Julian's face, watched the color drain from it, watched his jaw set, and braced herself for the moment he would deny it, would call his cousin a liar and her a stranger, would choose, at last and in front of everyone, the estate over her. He did not deny it. He crossed the ballroom floor, past Arabella Finch's stricken face, past his grandfather's fury, and he took Cecilia's bare left hand in both of his, in front of every witness who mattered to either of their futures. My cousin is entirely correct, Julian said, and his voice did not shake, though hers, watching him, very nearly did. This is not my sister. This is my wife. I married Cecilia Hartley in February, of my own choosing, because I love her more than I have ever loved anything this family has offered me in exchange for my obedience. And I have spent 3 months ashamed of the lie I asked her to live, not of the truth I am telling you now. You will lose everything, the Earl said, his voice like a door slamming. You understand that. Every acre, every tenant, all of it, to Reginald. I understand it perfectly. Julian did not let go of her hand. I would rather lose Rowan with my wife beside me than keep it while pretending she is anyone else. I have made my choice, grandfather. I made it in February. Tonight I am only stopping the lying about it. What happened next recast, in the space of a single evening, everything Cecilia thought she understood about the man she had married. The Earl did not speak for a long moment, long enough that Reginald's triumphant expression began, very slightly, to falter, as though he too had expected an outcome other than the one now unfolding. When the Earl did speak, his voice had lost its fury, and something older and stranger had taken its place. "Sit down, all of you," he said, to the room at large, and then, more quietly, to Julian and Cecilia both. "Not you two. You will come with me." In the small study off the ballroom, away from 300 pairs of listening ears, the Earl of Rowan poured himself a brandy with a hand that was not entirely steady, and told them a story neither of them had ever heard. "I married for the estate," he said. "Your grandmother was chosen for me, the way I chose Miss Finch for you. A good name, a fortune to mend what my father had broken. I did my duty. I do not regret the children she gave me, or the years we shared building something out of obligation instead of love. But I have watched you, Julian, for 3 months, courting a girl you plainly did not love, growing thinner and more distant with every week, and I confess I began to wonder whether I was building the same cage for you that was built for me, only calling it inheritance instead of duty, as though changing the name changed the bars." He looked then at Cecilia, really looked at her, for the first time since she had entered his house wearing a false name. "I do not know you, Mrs. Ashworth. I know only that my grandson loves you enough to burn down everything I offered him, rather than continue lying about you. That is either the greatest foolishness I have witnessed in 60 years, or it is the one thing in this family that has not been built on a transaction in 3 generations. I find, to my own considerable surprise, that I would rather it be the second." "Grandfather," Julian started. "The clause requires my consent," the Earl said. "It does not require that consent be given before the marriage, only that it be given. I am an old man who has spent tonight learning that the family name has been safer these 3 months, in the keeping of a solicitor's daughter, with nowhere left to hide than it ever was in the keeping of every heiress I tried to arrange for you. You have my consent, Julian. Rather later than you needed it, and rather more publicly than either of us would have wished. But you have it." They did not return to the ballroom that night the way they had left it, as brother and sister, performing a lie for an audience that had never deserved the truth withheld from it. They returned as the Viscount Ashworth and his wife, and if the whispers that followed them across the floor were scandalized, they were, by the small hours, scandalized in the particular way society reserves for stories it will retell for years, softening with every telling into something almost like a fairy tale. Reginald left before the dancing resumed. Cecilia watched him go, and felt, to her own surprise, no triumph in it, only a tired kind of sorrow for a man who had been fighting, in his own frightened way, for a family he too was trying to save, and who had simply chosen the wrong weapon and the wrong moment to use it. Arabella Finch, for her part, would marry within the year a baronet's son who loved her plainly and without complication, and would later confess to a friend that she had never truly minded losing Julian Ashworth, only the manner of the losing. Publicly, at her own betrothal ball, was, she allowed, a great deal more drama than the match had ever required. But it was Cecilia, near midnight, standing at last beside her husband on that same ballroom floor, with her true name spoken aloud, and her wedding ring restored to her bare hand, where it had always belonged, who understood best what the evening had cost, and given in equal measure. She had spent 3 months being introduced as someone she was not, curtsying to a lie with her whole body, because the truth had seemed, for a while, too dangerous to survive. If there is one thing this story has tried to tell you, it is this. The truth does not stay buried simply because we are afraid of what it costs to dig it up. It waits. And sometimes, when it finally surfaces, it does not ruin everything. Sometimes, it is the only thing strong enough to build a life on. If that's a truth you needed tonight as much as Cecilia needed it then, I'm glad you stayed until the end, and I'll be here with another one soon. Until next time, from all of us at Noble Tales, take care of the truths you're carrying. They deserve better than a lifetime of introductions as someone else.